Russians drink vodka all the time. Russian will always be a mafia.
We don't care about you. We're just tough Russian, and we don't care what you think about us.
Russia, it's a bad country, but it's not true.
They take all kinds of risks. They go inside the frozen ice. So I think Russians need to open up a little bit more. It was too dangerous for me, but my friend did it.
He's still alive?
I hope he's alive.
Oi.
This is weird.
How long do you live in Moscow?
Well, I've lived for about 5 years in Moscow.
I've lived here since the 17th of August, which is now 5 months.
I've been living here for 4 years now.
I guess 4 years, almost 4 years.
Do you know Russian language?
Well, I know enough to understand, not enough to make a friend.
A little bit. I'm not fluent, but I can speak a little bit. I can understand also a little bit.
Yes, a little bit.
Да, чуть-чуть, но я не говорю хорошо, я говорю очень плохо.
Why did you decide to learn Russian?
Because I was surrounded by Russian people in my hometown where I was living and working. There was Russians everywhere. My city is quite Russian city now, and I thought it would be good to know the language, the culture.
Because I'm living here in Russia and I need to communicate with Russians, so and also not many Russians speak English, so that's why.
Потому что мне очень нравится русский язык. I love Russian language and Russian women, of course.
Is it possible to live in Moscow without Russian?
Well, it's possible to do the daily stuff, but I highly recommend, if you want to live a good life, please learn Russian.
It's possible, but it's very hard. It's better if you learn a little bit, because it's hard to get directions, to buy something if you don't understand anything.
Yeah, it can be, but for one period, you know, because at least you will need to communicate, you know, or work or something like that. So.
It is possible to live in Moscow without Russian. A lot of my colleagues do it. They never even try to learn Russian. They're just in a little English bubble between the school and their homes, and they hang out with a bunch of other Brits, usually one of which does speak Russian, so they can get along without it. I prefer to integrate with Russians. I think it's really important to learn the language and culture when you're visiting somewhere. So,
your expectations about Russia before you come here?
Well, actually, I don't really like to listen to the opinion of people, but I had a lot of stereotypes. People told me that there's going to be a lot of mafias, this, that, blah, blah, and you know, what you see in Hollywood movies, basically.
We were very low. I had very low expectation because the propaganda American in Europe is very strong for many years, and they just let us know that it's a very dangerous country and poor country.
It was high. Yeah, higher than now, but I'm still believing in Russia. Russia is really good.
Yeah, my expectations didn't have outstanding expectations. I think I was just expecting to be a lot like Europe in terms of the way people lived, and it is largely that. People are a little bit more closed here, but I was expecting that, so not a whole lot of difference than what I was expecting.
Did it change over time?
Absolutely, because whatever I heard about Russians was not true. In fact, they are very welcoming people. It's just that they are from a different culture. Once we understand their culture, they begin to respect us.
Yeah, my expectations have changed a lot here, because I found a country that it's not like Europe, like France, but it's similar. And it's a lot better than I thought. I couldn't expect in this. Because we heard a lot of bad things like pollution, chemical radiation everywhere, you know, in the news. They like to say bad things about Russia in the newspaper and TV, but they don't say the good things. They just give us the bad news. When a plane crashes in Russia, oh, this is Russia. When a factory explodes, oh, this is Russia. But they don't say the good things. I don't know why. And you, Russian, you should sell your movie in Europe and your music. That would be a good marketing. That would be a good propaganda also.
Largely, no. I think that what I thought about Russia is pretty much the case. They're just different than Canadians are, and not necessarily in a bad way. They're just going about their business, because life in Moscow is busy and hectic and nobody really has the time for anything but doing what they do for work and family life.
No, I imagined Russia like that and it is like that, so to change nothing.
Do you remember your first impression of Russia and Russians?
Yes, I do remember when I landed it was cold and I didn't understand anything which was written around me, and I don't understand what people are talking, but over the time I got used to it and it's been all good.
I saw buildings, I saw shops, I was wow, okay, I saw good roads. And it was nice first impression.
This is Russia, because, I arrived to Samara, so the roads of Samara were terrible, so I say, okay, I'm Russian. But then, people are really nice, a little bit rude, but are nice when you finally understand them.
For the first impression I had of a Russian was on the airplane from the UK, and this woman I sat beside, and we got into a very deep and intimate conversation very quickly, and she just couldn't believe we were having this conversation. She couldn't understand how she was being so open with somebody after only a couple of hours. So yeah, it was an interesting conversation.
One thing about Russia and Russians is that they take all kinds of risks. They were the first people to go into space. They do crazy things. They take bath in freezing water during the Christmas time. They go inside the frozen ice. So I learned that if you are dedicated enough and if you're courageous enough, you can try anything. And disadvantages, well, not really disadvantages, but I think Russians need to open up a little bit more to the world. Maybe they need to start accepting international community.
Yes, I think the advantages of Russians is they're very cautious, they're very smart about who they let in, and they're always critically analyzing everything, which comes from their history, it comes from their culture. The disadvantage then, of course, is that it's really hard to get to know Russians until you've had a lot of time with them and they let down their guard and they trust you. And at that point, of course, it's a friend forever, a friend for life, which again is an advantage.
Russians are, how can I say, are nice, and I guess it's only this I can say, you know, just nice, sometimes complicated, but nice.
What was the most difficult thing to get used to in Russia?
Well, of course, the climate, no doubt, because it's not usual for South Asian people, just in general, to be accustomed to these sub-zero temperatures. And everything else, I think it was quite normal. So.
The first thing I think was very hard was the transportation, because I couldn't understand Russian, and getting into the metro was very, very difficult.
The most difficult thing to get used to in Russia is it is the language. It is hard to understand Russian if you don't have a basis in it, and you'll have to use it frequently, although not always, because there's machines out there that will do some of the work that Russians would do otherwise, and it's better, of course, to talk with Russians and to try to get over that linguistic barrier, but that is probably the most difficult thing here in Russia, is just using language.
Communication. Communication.
What is still not common to?
No, I think now I'm very familiar with the Russian culture and Russian food, for example. It's all normal to me.
Difficult to communicate with administrations, offices like bank and services, because they have a very technical vocabulary that I don't know, and sometimes it can get hard to get what I need or what I want.
See people drunk on transport or see people drinking on Monday, for example, or in the snow drinking, you know, or walking on the street without jackets in winter. No, this is unusable for me.
What do you like in Russia?
Well, I like the fact that Russians respect their tradition and culture so much. Russians, one of the most interesting things, that Russian metro is the only metro where I see people reading books. Really, I have been to so many places in the world and nobody respects books and reading as much as Russians do.
I love the dynamism. It's a dynamic city. You can find everything you want, and you're in a big city. You got a lot of work, but also you can have a lot of fun, lots of sports and parks and parties.
What do I like in Russia? I like the food. I like the culture. I like the women, and I don't particularly like the weather. I do like getting out and exploring Moscow though, because there's so many really interesting things to see here between parks and architecture and the river and just even the metro stations in Moscow are just amazing. I've never seen metro stations that are themselves works of art. It is just astounding here.
I like the forests from Russia. I like the people from Russia. Well, I like the cars. It's complicated, but yeah, I like the cars. Russian cars are very different than another cars.
What you don't like?
What I don't like? I don't like the paperwork in Moscow. There is a lot of paperwork. Even when I order a bottle of water, there is a paper of 2 pages.
Bureaucracy and how you spend the papers for everything, and still have not the conscience here to recycle things. Those things I don't like.
Not in Russia, because I don't. In Moscow, I don't like the weather. It's too windy, very windy. Winter like summer, and the snow, I don't really like it too, but it doesn't last all the time, So it's mostly the wind that I don't like, and the noise also. Too many cars.
I don't like the weather in Russia. It's not because it's cold, it's because it's constantly overcast and you hardly ever see the sun. And after 3 months of it, it's a little depressing.
Have you ever been somewhere else in Russia besides Moscow?
Yes, of course. So I have been to St. Petersburg, I've been to Sochi, I've been to Murmansk, I've been to this small village called Tereberika, I've been to Vladimir, I've been to Suzdal, I've been to Sochi, I've been to Tver, I've been to Kalomna, and so forth.
Yes, I went several times to St. Petersburg. I went to the Murmansk, which is in the north. I went to Kazan for the World Cup. I went to Sochi. I went to Krim. I went to Kaliningrad, and that's pretty much all. Yeah. Yes, I was in other cities like Sochi, Kazan, Volgograd, Belgorod, Tolyatti, Saratov. Yeah.
I have been to St. Petersburg, and it was much the same weather, snowy at that point in December. Younger population. Moscow is a little bit older and a little bit more of the working city. If I were to compare it to somewhere in the States or Canada, I would call it a university town in St. Petersburg, a lot younger, a lot more centralized, at least, party life downtown in St. Petersburg, and it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed St. Petersburg.
Russian mentality.
Russian mentality. I think a lot of people think that Russians are cold and they don't smile, but really Russians believe in strength. They want you to be strong enough to face any situation.
Russian mentality. Well, they're going back to the closed-mindedness and the difficulty with breaking down barriers. That's the issue that you have with the Russian mentality.
They are positive people. They like to travel a lot, the Russians. They're always traveling. They're always on holiday somewhere. They love to save on accommodation to travel more. So you can see them in Europe, you can see them in Cyprus, you can see them in Bali, Dubai. They travel a lot, and I think it's good. It's good for them to be open-minded, to learn languages, and to meet other people, because it's quite a closed country. I don't know, maybe in the future they must open their minds and open their products to around the world, not only in the market of post-Soviet Union, because you really have a nice product. The only thing maybe it's you don't believe in your products, that's why. You must believe in yourself. Those countries.
What are the most difficult things for foreigners in Russia, in Moscow?
to get a visa if you want to stay here, and to understand a woman.
The most difficult things for foreigners in Russia are probably just mundane day-to-day things that you take advantage back home, like having a dryer. I have a washer here, but there's no dryer. And as a result, I found after a while that wearing cotton clothes required you to do a lot of ironing, which we're just not used to doing because we throw it in the dryer back home and it tumbles dry and you can take it out right away. You don't have to iron it. But fortunately, I brought a lot of football jerseys, this sort of material, and you just hang to dry and then you pick it up and you can wear it. And I think it's an odd answer, but it is the most difficult thing I've come across in my time here.
It's a total bureaucracy, because when they need to, or well, we need to do our documents, all of Russians think like we are speaking Russian, so they started to speak loud or be rude. This is the problem, I guess.
Which stereotypes about Russia exist in your country?
I think a lot of stereotypes. Some of the stereotypes that Russians drink vodka all the time, and another stereotype that a Russian will always be a mafia or something, but I don't see it happening here.
They say that Russians love to fight, men. They say that girls are prostitutes, and people drink a lot.
Stereotypes about Russia exist in Canada. Being rough, being tough, being, you know, we don't care about you. We're just tough Russian and we don't care what you think about us. That's a stereotype. I don't know if Russians do actually care, but that's one stereotype we have about Russians. What else? Russian women are beautiful, but that stereotype is true. Yeah, I mean, you always get the babushka women around too. They're hobbling along. There's lots of old women here in Moscow that you would typify as the babushka type of woman you would expect to find here. But the young women here are amazing. They really are wonderful. Like you.
Thank you.
Oh, unfortunately, bad stereotypes, you know, like Russia, it's a bad country or something like that. But it's not true, of course.
Which stereotypes are true, which are not?
A lot of girls are prostitutes.
Really?
Yes.
No way.
They do. I mean, every girl in Moscow can have sex just for an iPhone. No, in Moscow, girls do everything for money. They want 20,000 rubles, they're ready to have sex for this.
I think one stereotype which was true is that Russians are really good at mathematics and physics. Because a lot of my friends who are Russians, they really are good at it. And there are stereotypes which are not true, of course, as I said, about drinking, about, you know, being cold and not welcoming and so forth.
About cold weather, yes, it's true. About bad people, no, it's not true. They are really nice. Yeah.
Do Russians drink vodka a lot?
I think it depends on individual, really. It's not about Russian, because if you see, for example, Germans, they drink a lot of beer, for example, you know.
Not that much. I'm surprised. They drink a lot of wine like French, but vodka not that much. I thought it was a country of drunk people, but no, people don't get drunk that much. I'm surprised. Positively surprised.
I guess more piva, but more beer, but yeah, sometimes.
That's a great question. And that is a stereotype that we have from back home. And yes and no. I picked up a bottle of vodka today for 250 rubles for half a liter, which is, let me think about that. That's about $5 Canadian for a half liter of vodka, which is very inexpensive. So it'd be really easy to drink a lot here. And I've heard Russian men every once in a while out in the streets late at night in the end of summer, obviously drunk, and I've seen them on the streets occasionally. But I think that's a stereotype that goes back to the 90s when things were really, really bad here, and a lot of men were finding refuge in alcohol. And I don't think that that's necessarily true anymore. I think that a lot of the children that grew up with their fathers being like that in the late Soviet period in the 90s, they rejected alcohol because of the negative social impact it was having on the culture. Obviously, it still does exist, and it's inexpensive to buy vodka, but I think that that has improved over time.
Why Russians don't smile?
But I have a lot of Russian friends who smile, so I don't think it's true for all Russians, but I believe it's a matter of familiarity, that if they know you, they will smile at you. Maybe Russians do not like to smile at a stranger. It's possible.
I don't know. They should learn how to smile. Maybe it's because of the weather, but I don't think so. Because I've been in other countries, people were smiling. Maybe they have a bad esteem of themselves. Maybe they think low of themselves. I don't know. They think are not good enough. I don't know why they don't smile. They should smile because they are good people. And if they were smiling more and be more polite, people would love them everywhere they go.
No, they smile too much, you know, just on the street maybe, but well, my friends or other people who I met on the street, or I don't know, in some places, they were really nice with me, so they smile always.
Why don't Russians smile? I think Russians don't smile because I don't want to say that they don't have something to smile about. There's good things to smile about in Russia. I just don't think it's part of their culture to be outwardly happy when they're not around people that make them happy. I think they're genuine that way. Maybe Westerners are a little bit too happy. We smile all the time, even though we don't have to. Maybe we have gas, I don't know. The fact is that Westerners smile too easily and Russians don't smile easily enough. There's got to be some happy medium in there somewhere where we're not all smiley or all frowny, but we smile when it's appropriate.
Have you already met with Russian mafia?
Unfortunately, no, but I would like to meet, for sure.
I have not met with the Russian mafia. I would love to meet with the Russian mafia. I think that would be such a cool experience. Don't know where to find them. Do you know where to find the Russian mafia? It gotta be somewhere.
Yes, but not here in France. I met this guy, he's a mafioso, Mikhail Zivilo is called, and he was exiled in France because Putin wanted him dead. So I met him many times because I was going to a hotel, to the bar many times, and this guy was here all the time. But here, maybe I have, but I don't know, because here people are, you know, here there are lots of security, lots of bodyguards. I don't know if there are.
Do you believe in Russian mafia?
Of course there is.
Oh, okay.
Of course there is Russian mafia. I know here you can.
Russian mafia everywhere.
You can pay the police, you can pay the judge here. Yeah, it's crazy.
No, thanks not.
Is it dangerous in Moscow?
No, I think Moscow is one of the safest cities that I've lived, even at late at night, because sometimes I come from work around 12:30 in the night, and absolutely there are police officers everywhere, there is security everywhere, and I can say with confidence that in the last 5 years I've had no problems regarding security whatsoever.
No. I mean, you mean in the street, like walking in the street?
Yeah.
No. It's dangerous in France, in Germany, in Belgium. Here, I can be in a park with my iPad. Nobody will steal my iPad. If I do the same in France, some guy will come, Arabs, because not French guy, but Arab. They will come, run, and take my iPad and run with it. They can even take my gold from my neck and scratch it. It's very dangerous in France, in Europe. In Moscow, it's safe. There's police everywhere. And normal people are scared to make troubles. So they are very quiet, they don't scream, they don't fight, and they don't steal. Something in Russia I like, you can go to a restaurant, you leave your jacket in the wardrobe, like this. It's safe. You cannot do this in France because people will steal your jacket or steal what's inside.
Wow.
Yeah. I love this in Russia, it's safe.
It's not dangerous in Moscow at all. I've been out late at night, I've been out early in the morning, I've never felt threatened anywhere in Moscow. It is not an issue in Moscow. Now, granted, I'm not a young woman either. I know that the young women I go out to bars, they say they constantly get groped, but I think that's probably true anywhere you go. I don't think it's dangerous to be in Moscow.
At the moment, no.
Your advice to foreigners who want to move to Russia?
I think foreigners need to be a little bit more open about Russians. They need to understand their history. They need to understand that a lot of Russians don't smile, that they are a little bit cold, because they have been through World War I and II. They lost a lot of men, So they have to build up the society again, and that can only be achieved through strength. So possibly this is what derived their behavior. But otherwise, you have a lot of things which you have not expected. The efficient metros, the wonderful architecture, the beautiful scenery, and just the city as it is, of course.
Do it. It's a great experience. You'll never regret it. You'll learn a lot. You'll see things that you never expected to see here in Moscow, and you'll be the better for it. You'll grow as a person.
My advice, if you don't have a job when you come to Moscow, you can start to teach your language, because people always want to learn languages, so you can make a little bit money like this to start with for the beginning. It's a good way to live, to pay your bills. Then you find a good job. And that's my first advice. Yeah. Teach your language. Do a lot of sports, because it's a very heavy city. Like I said, with lots of noise and people, and it's good to make sport to keep healthy mind. I think so.
Don't be afraid. First, leave the stereotypes of bad things of Russian. Read about it sometimes. Read about their culture. Which things they like and which not, because we are guests here, we are foreign, so and every city from Russia is different, so that's why it's better only to know a little bit about them, and because then you can get one surprise about it. So I guess the better thing is just be quiet and try to speak a little bit Russian.
Which Russian dishes can you recommend to try for tourists who travel to Russia?
Russian dishes. I don't remember the names, but there is a soup kind of thing. I forgot.
Borscht?
Borscht, of course. Very tasty. And then the Russian pelmeni is good. Then chiburek I like. And then, well, Russian salad, of course. And I want them to try this drink called medovka.
Medovka?
Medovka, my bad, medovka. It is really interesting, because it's possible to have without alcohol also. You need not have alcohol with medovka. It's very interesting.
I guess this is not original from Russia, but please try shawarma. It's really tasty for me.
I love the beef stroganoff. I really love it. I like the borscht also, it's very good. I like the pelmenis. And you have some good desserts also, yeah.
Dacha, what is it?
Well, Dacha is a summer house. It is very interesting that a lot of Russians, and I think it's something which you will find only in Russia, that a lot of Russians make a house outside the city, where they go every weekend, if not weekend, maybe on holidays, and they grow plants, they have a nice family time. Sometimes they keep their pets over there, and I think it's wonderful to have one.
It's the camping home, I guess. It's like, yeah, it's nice. All Russians have the same, I guess, dachas.
I've been only twice to Dacha. It's a little house in the countryside, where people go in the weekend to make party with friends, and they have a sauna there, and after they go to the sauna, and after they jump into the snow. This is funny, I did it twice, I love it. Yeah.
So you already answered the second question was Banya, what is it?
Banya, because there's Banya and sauna, it's different. Yeah? Because I went with friends in the countryside, in a small sauna, and after went in the snow. But when I go to Moscow, big sauna, big Banya, there's a lot of men, a lot of people in the room. I prefer to go to Dacha with friends, and we have a sauna there. We use all together. We have dinner with a sauna, and we go to the snow. Than going to the big city sauna where everybody is there. Because at 2 days, I don't really like it. There are 200 men in the same room, naked, drinking and talking and eating, and this is not really my thing. I don't want to walk around with my dick like this. This is weird.
Banya. Banya.
Banya, yeah, very interesting, because last week when I was in Vladimir with Russians and with a lot of my European friends, we had Banya, and one thing which I was challenged to do, Banya is basically steam house, so you take steam, and then sometimes Russian from the steam, go and dip into the frozen water and then come back. And I was asked if I could do, and I decided not to do because it was too dangerous for me. But my friend, one of my Indian friends, did it. And he went straight into the...
He's still alive?
He's sleeping there. I hope he's alive.
If you like to take a sauna, you know, the sauna with some freshes, like, you will do it very well.
Are Russians hospitable people?
Yes, of course. It depends on how you treat them. That's true with any country.
Yes, they are, but they want to meet you, they want to party with you, but in public places, in restaurants, bars, clubs, but they don't invite you in their home. Or you can rent a house with them for the weekend in the Dacha, in the countryside, and go with friends, but you don't go to their house. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, they are hospitable.
Is it difficult or easy to find friends in Moscow?
I think now with the help of social media, it's quite easy because there are a lot of clubs where people would like to meet you to exchange language. So maybe you can teach them English, they can teach you Russian, and it's possible.
It's easy. You just have to do activities. If you play tennis, you make friends at tennis. With football, you make people play football, you make friends with them. Or people will like your language or your country. It's easy. People know they get in. Because you're foreigner, they want to know who you are, where you're from.
Maybe for some people, yeah, it can be difficult because, as I told you, they are something close, you know. So you must to broad those barriers. So in my case, fortunately, no. For me, it is easy to get friends from Russia.
Of course.
Do you have a lot of Russian friends?
I think I have friends from all countries, Russians and German, Indian, of course.
I do. Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah.